Applebee's on.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible. Who you do business with is more important than where they're located. Bank from the comfort of your own home with Emprise Bank. Coming up, the latest episode of the KC Laboratory Podcast with Ken Swanson, Craig Stout, and Matt Lane. Coming to you on the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. You can find all of our channels covering all the local teams wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Just search KCSN. And now, the latest episode of the KC Laboratory.
It's a live KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. Matthew Lane, this feels today like a perfect opportunity to give you what you've wanted for the last, I don't know, when was the draft? I don't know, since May 1. A chance, a platform to talk some draft. I think we're going to do it today, buddy.
Listen, this is what happens when you have the number one seed in the AFC. When you get a bye week year after year after year, this is what you get to do during the wild card weekend of the NFL playoffs. You get to start draft talk, and there's no Kent Swanson, there's no Craig Stout, there's no BJ Kissel that can hold me back when we have a bye week during this wild card weekend. It is time. It is time to talk draft, Craig. Buddy, I know you've been busy. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch more than a couple prospects that I've probably watched with you, but I'm so glad that you were here. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to be happy to see your face in Las Vegas as we get ready for the Shrine Bowl.
I am so into this show and relaxed. We don't have to really focus on the Chiefs or anything. I've got Ben Holiday, Bottle and Bond in a glass. This is going to be a great show. I'm going to learn so much from you, Maddie. It's going to be great.
Craig's vibing tonight.
I'm vibing.
We're gonna keep it about 50,000 feet. We're not gonna get granular on.
I'm out minutes, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be more just like big picture stuff than it is like we're gonna get all the way into the weeds on every single prospect. So Maddie can just deal with that. But before we get into anything, we do have a very special announcement as it pertains to a giveaway that we are doing for the KCSN Foundation. So we are having a ticket giveaway where you can win 2 tickets to the AFC divisional rounds. You can get 2 entries to the Tickets for Less VIP tailgate and 1 parking pass. So 2 tickets, 2 entries to the Tickets for Less VIP tailgate and 1 parking pass. By donating to the KC Sports Network Venmo, you are entered. 1 ticket is $10. 8 tickets is $50. Again, you're going to get a chance to go to the AFC divisional round. Might be the only playoff game in Arrowhead this year. KC Sports Network is the Venmo. $10 1 ticket, 8 tickets, $50. There should be a link to the Venmo in the description of this show. But you have until January 18th to get your tickets. You're going to get a chance to go to the game, and you are going to help the KCSN Foundation in a big way. Helping us continue to, do things in this community that we want to, that we love doing and want to support. So, it gives you an opportunity to help a lot of people in the area and potentially go to the AFC divisional round. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're watching. Thanks everybody for hanging out. It is going to be a draft show tonight because I'm actually really excited. If you've been following us, you know how much we geek out about the roster building stuff, and we're energized by the roster building stuff. And the draft is obviously a big factor that, we write a book about it every year. But we're not going to get into day 3 safeties. We're going to maybe a little bit, but Maddie's hell-bent on that happening. But I think it's worth having a big picture conversation about, this team's big glaring needs heading into the offseason, this team's, potential draft strategy, and looking at, where there are maybe some big pockets of players that they could potentially capitalize on when it comes to, ranges of the draft, the first, the top 100 picks. So I think it's probably worth going through a few positions and talking about, what could happen at the position and whether or not we think it's worth investing in draft capital in it. So I think like the one I want to start with is Orlando Brown. Like that's the big question. There's a lot of debate about what to do with Orlando Brown. Do you sign him to a big deal? Does he agree to a big deal? Do you franchise tag him for a second year? If you do franchise tag him, what's the game plan? Are you investing in the tackle position for the long term and saying goodbye to Orlando Brown after this season? I think that's one of the outside of Chris Jones, that might be the biggest question mark for this offseason and the biggest what could be the biggest determining factor in how this team approaches the draft, Matthew.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of draft talk, but I agree that you have to start it with Orlando Brown Jr. And I would even push back that it's probably more important to figure this out than Chris Jones.
He's under because Chris Jones is under contract.
Is under contract, and the more I look at it, the Chiefs technically, with the way the cap's going, can ride with him for what his cap hit is next year. Like it's doable. So this is bigger, and more so this bigger is Orlando Brown Jr. is just about to turn 27 in May. He's still young, especially for an offensive tackle. He's been healthy throughout his career. So like this isn't a guy that you're worried about coming up anywhere close to what you would anticipate being a production drop-off or a play level drop-off. So the Chiefs are kind of in a weird spot, and they have this above average left tackle, maybe well above average. He's making, maybe well above average. Apparently his peers and opposing coaches think he's well above average. And he's coming into his prime, especially for this position. How do you openly choose and willingly walk away from that? What is the thought process to do that? You want to say you're picking in the top 10 and you want to go draft a top 10 tackle to replace him? Absolutely fine. Save money. You're hoping you get better than above average left tackle play out of that guy. When you're drafting at the end of round one perennially, that becomes a lot more difficult. So like this is a huge decision they have to decide. And I honestly, much like last year, I think his play down the stretch kind of made the choice for them. Then, if I'm being frank, I think he's played his way into being a Chief one way or another for at least, at minimum, one more year.
I made the argument last offseason that the Chiefs should pay him, and they did put a contract on the table. Obviously, Orlando Brown and his agent decided that they wanted to go, let it ride another year, try and prove that he was worth that money. All he's done in that time period, he didn't start very hot, but was make another Pro Bowl, was go ahead and perform well at the end of the year again, continued to be one of Patrick Mahomes's, left-hand man. I was going to say right-hand man, but he plays on the left-hand man. So like he's very integral to the locker room. He's very integral to what Patrick Mahomes does. He understands what Mahomes does. He made another Pro Bowl. At this point, like Maddie said, with his age and the production that you are going to get over the life of that contract, I don't see how he doesn't make at least what he made last year, as far as a contract goes. We'll see. I understand him wanting to hold out, be the top paid tackle and all that. Laramie Tunsil is going to have something to say with that this year, and maybe that will help set the market a little bit. The Chiefs might say, hey, we're not coming up to that number, but we'll come up to this number instead. Maybe that's what helps bridge the gap. But Maddie's spot on here. The earliest that the Chiefs can pick with their natural pick this year is 27. That's right. Based on their record, based on everything else that will sort out, and based on them having to buy, the earliest that they can pick is 27th. So that's tough. That is really tough to look at and say, oh, you can get a guy, go out and just wait. You can wait for that sort of guy. Historically, that's not the case. You don't find really, truly elite left tackles typically at that point. As a matter of fact, it is more likely that you are going to find a downgrade to Orlando Brown Jr. Yes, it saves money. Yes, you can use that money elsewhere. I understand all of those arguments, but frankly, you need to protect Patrick Mahomes. So I think Orlando Brown Jr. gets paid this offseason.
And I think, let's just say, if they tag him again, I don't think that they're getting a long-term deal with him done for, beyond this year. Like, I think if they tag him this year, the plan is they're moving on. Mm-hmm. Now, that's where it gets a little bit interesting. Let's say they tag Orlando Brown. If they tag Orlando Brown, do you try to find a tackle in the back end of round one this year to develop for a year? Is that a tactic that you try to employ, Matthew?
Okay, so now I'm pivoting from broad spectrum stuff into this particular draft class, right? So now you go from
Go for it.
Theoretically, yes, that is a path that is 100% acceptable. You're going to take a slightly, probably if your goal is to start Orlando Brown Jr. for a year and then cycle in a new guy after he develops for a year, you're taking a higher ceilinged, more developmental tackle prospect that probably is a high-end athlete that flashes but isn't ready. So you'll take him at the end of round one. Think Walker Little for the Jaguars, a guy that we were kind of high on that's got forced into playing time down the stretch this year and has been pretty good. You're kind of thinking of a guy along those lines, towards the end of round one. I guess that was a little early for him, but still, that's what you're thinking. You can do that. In this particular draft class, though, I think the offensive tackle class's strength kind of comes in that range. You're outside of the top 20 to the top 75 range, maybe even top 100. I think you're going to have a handful of offensive tackles that you can find in round two, maybe even into round three, that aren't going to be that much worse than the guys that you would be taking at the end of round one. So would I want to do that in this draft class? Would I want to reach a little bit and take an Anton Harrison, an offensive tackle out of Oklahoma, versus waiting and taking Blake Freeland, an offensive tackle out of BYU, a Darnell Wright tackle out of Tennessee a round or two later? I don't know. I think that's where you start to tier these guys up. So this year, I almost think the Chiefs will be better off, regardless of what they do with Orlando Brown Jr., waiting until day two to take that developmental tackle. And we can't forget in all of this, they need a right tackle too, right?
Yeah.
They also need a right tackle. So there's to remember that.
Okay, so this was the next question. I'll ask Craig this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is just okay. Let's say that they go out and they extend Orlando Brown Jr. or they tag him. I don't care. Either one. Just like a DeJuan Jones. Just a massive human. So you've got two massive giant bookends.
Mm-hmm.
Just do you go right tackle early in the draft? Do you go try to take a right tackle early and just build a giant wall around Patrick LaVon Mahomes?
I mean, yes, I would prefer that. I mean, especially since you've got two young interior, offensive linemen there.
Yeah.
Cost controlled. And yes, you are paying Joe Thuney, and yes, you are playing Orlando Brown Jr., but you can get by with not having an elite player at a position. We talk about it all the time when building offensive line. You can get away with not having an elite player at one of those positions, but frankly, that's where the value kind of is. Like if you wanted to tell me that Darnell Wright, near the end of round two, which I don't know if he'll be around for that, but a guy for Tennessee that played right tackle a lot, he is fun as hell to watch and would be really fun in this offense. A good mover, a guy that can bulldoze dudes in the run game, lives to pancake people. Like, I mean, I love watching guys like that. If you told me that was the pick in round two, I'm not going to argue it one bit. Make the strength a strength. All of a sudden, you take this offensive line from potentially a top, 6, 7, 8 unit to a top 3 unit if Wright works out in that scenario. So yes, absolutely, you can do that. Protect Patrick Mahomes. Lean on the run game when you're ahead. Like all those things work out for the Chiefs. So I would absolutely take a right tackle early in that scenario.
Yeah, it's worth examining, and that would be just a fun proposition there. Just to load up on the offensive line, just create a really good group. I mean, it's already a good group in front of Mahomes, but just continuing to add that. We're spending a lot of time talking about the draft today, if you couldn't tell, and Tucker Franklin's here to talk to you a little bit about DraftKings.
The NFL playoff picture is locked in, and my go-to place for wild card round action is DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off the road to Super Bowl 57, new customers can bet just $5 and get 200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat bet each day of the wild card round this weekend. Just place any NFL bet of your choice, and if it loses, you'll get a free bet back up to $10. Action's so good, why bet on the NFL playoffs anywhere else? As Chiefs fans, we get to kick our feet up this weekend and watch all this wild card round action and get to experience the phenomenal app that DraftKings Sportsbook has. And here's what you got to do to get these deals. You got to download that DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code KCSN. New customers can bet just $5 on the NFL and get 200 in free bets instantly only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See the show notes for details.
I'm not advocating for this. Let the record show. I'm not advocating for this. I did just see this question from Mike Guy, and I think it's worth examining a little bit when we're looking at a draft conversation. Mike Guy leaves a comment. By the way, leave a comment if you'd like. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. What would Chris Jones' trade value be? Well, I think that's just worth exploring. If you go out and you trade Chris Jones, again, I'm not advocating for it. Don't do it. This team, I don't know. Here's real quick. Here's my problem with trading Chris Jones. Like, yes, I understand he's aging. Yes, I understand he's going to be expensive. I don't know what is available out in the market to be able to help you generate at a high level, generate a pass rush, generate pressure, and improve that team. Like, I'm nervous about that. Like, you guys both think you have some ideas, but like, what's it going to cost? Well, Craig does at least.
My idea is you don't trade Chris Jones and you add Deron Payne and you just have an elite interior defensive line. Like
Payne, Hargrave, there's some.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Either one of those two.
But those are trades, correct? Deron Payne would be a trade, correct?
No, they're both free agents.
Free agent.
Okay,
they're both free agents. That's probably your two best defensive line free agents: is Javon Hargrave and Deron Payne.
My whole thing is, though, if you're going to build through the interior defensive line, I mean, that would mean adding to the interior and not replacing Chris Jones with a Deron Payne.
Correct.
I guess is my thing. It's like that's where I go. So let's just or do you have something, Maddie? Jump in.
Well, I was going to give you the path. Like, I don't think this is the case because I think the Indianapolis Colts trading for DeForest Buckner for, what was it, pick 13? People think that that's like the starting price for a Chris Jones trade. I don't think so. The age matters. How much money he's going to want matters. And I think that Colts trade was a little bit of an outlier. I think the Colts trading that pick for a defensive tackle was an outlier. I don't think teams around the NFL are using that as a barometer of what they're going to trade for a defensive tackle or any defensive lineman. It's similar to the Christian Kirk deal for the Jaguars. We heard how that made a bunch of teams mad because now all of a sudden there's this, deal that's way out of the market that they have to, reply to or act on. And eventually they just kind of started ignoring it because it was an outlier. I think DeForest Buckner for the 13th overall pick's an outlier. So I throw that out, and now you're looking around. What is a defensive tackle who's nearing 30 that's going to want $27 million a year? What's his trade value actually going to be? So, okay, let's say you get a late first round pick for him. And I think that's probably the best case scenario. Like, that's what I assume is the best case scenario. Okay, now what am I doing with that? Am I going to come out of this draft with BJ Ojulari and then pay Deron Payne $20 million, save just a little bit of money and hope that's as good? I don't see how you get as good. The only way that trade makes sense is if a Colts level team comes in and offers you a pick around the 10th overall pick, and you are either going to use that to trade up and go get, Jalen Carter and hope he becomes Chris Jones, or you're going to take, Tyree Wilson, Miles Murphy, defensive ends out of Texas Tech or Clemson, get better at defensive end and still pay a Hargrave or a Payne. Like, there's your path to saving a little money, maybe getting better, getting more complete along the defensive line. I just don't think you're going to get a top 10-ish pick for Chris Jones in trade, and then that whole theory's scrapped.
Yeah, and it's Carter and then a cliff. Like, I mean, it is. So you're not looking at a draft pick and going, well, we'll just get that guy to come in and affect the passer the way that Chris Jones did. And you can rewind back to last offseason where I'm sitting here going, yeah, Chris Jones not playing for this team this next year. I will, all this stuff. He has blossomed under Joe Cullen. He had by far his best year ever. Clearly needs to be on this team. I don't think it's a contract year thing either. Like, he is a different player, because if it was just a contract year thing, I think you'd see him sack hunting more than he is. He's playing the run at a much better level. He's being a lot more gap sound. He's playing within the scheme. Like, there's a lot of things that people have said about Chris Jones in the past, and pretty much all of them are just completely gone this year. So no, I don't think Chris Jones gets traded. Even if it was, yeah, I'm with Maddie. Back into the first round. I don't think that pick moves the needle enough for what Chris Jones does for this defense.
I'm gonna throw this out here really quick though. The Eagles have the 10th pick, and they're losing Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. That's the only one I could potentially see as like making some sense for that team, those teams in that range, because they are losing those interior rushers. So maybe something like that. But
I think you consider it. I mean, I think you would. I think if that's the pick you're getting back, I mean, you would be wild not to consider it. And at that point in time, it all comes down to how you feel about the players in this draft. And do you think if a Jalen Carter and Will Anderson are off the board, how do you feel about Myles Murphy, Tyree Wilson? How do you feel about that next group after the top two? Because you probably won't get Carter or Anderson at 10, but you might get the next guy. So if you love a Myles Murphy, if you love Tyree Wilson, then maybe you do consider that move. Now, you still need to go out and get veterans, and the best veterans happen to be at defensive tackle, and they're probably going to want to get paid too. When Chris Jones is out there making $28 million, guess who else's price tag goes up? The other D tackles. But I could see the path to thinking that your team is going to be better now when you get a top 10 pick at defensive end and you bring in maybe not a tier 1, maybe a tier 2, a tier 2.5 defensive tackle instead of having, like, I can see the path to that working. I don't think you're getting a pick high enough to make it work.
Well, and it's even more of a moot point when they spend that pick on Quentin Johnston instead, and they don't add to the defense.
Okay, now wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Broderick Jones might be available at 10. And after I watch that man get out in open space against TCU and eliminate those tiny little guys. Okay, hold on. I'm back in now.
Yeah. But I mean, I think those, like, if you look at the two big things that kind of affect how the Chiefs offseason is going to go and ultimately the draft's going to go, is I think those are the two big things, the big decisions that this football team has to make. It's, hey, what's happening with Orlando Brown? What's happening with Chris Jones? I don't know. Like, yeah, it's a sum of their parts improvement across the defensive line if you move on from Chris Jones. And like, yeah, maybe it's, Deron Payne, Myles Murphy, George Karlaftis is your pass rush next year. I mean,
I'm not mad at it, but I don't love it. Like, you're not.
Like, to me, across the board, I think that sounds better than what it was this year. The only difference was Chris Jones was so good that I don't know if you make up for, like, just based on name value, I read off that foursome versus the current, Karlaftis, Noddy or Saunders, Chris Jones, and then like Frank or Dunlap or whoever. That foursome, that group doesn't scare me as much as the one that you just read overall. The issue is you still have to figure out how to handle Chris Jones. If you do, you're good. But if you can't, then the game's kind of over. So I see both sides, and that's a tough spot to be in. This trade would have made a lot more sense a couple of years ago than it would have now.
For sure. But it's going to be fascinating to see how, I mean, those are big key moments for this team in their offseason. And then it'll a lot of dominoes will fall in how this team, kind of, is built from there. But I would be stunned if neither, I honestly, I expect Orlando Brown Jr. and Chris Jones back at this point. I think the offseason would be very interesting if one of them isn't, but it'd be like Tyreek Hill again. Not quite maybe to the same scale, because I don't think the draft capital that you're going to get is going to be the same, the value of it, but it'll be a seismic shift in how this team is building itself for the future. And look, if the Chiefs win a Super Bowl this year, maybe that gives you a little grace to say, you know what, we're gonna get cute here a little bit at the interior defensive line and try to, that could be an opportunity for them to just, move on a little bit from, if they get another ring under their belts or something like that. But I don't know. I'd be surprised if either of those guys are not Chiefs next year. I want to talk about the receiver position now. I want to ask you guys a little bit about the receiver position, because, man, it's wild. It's just wild because, you don't know what's going to happen with Juju. Travis Kelce continues to defy age, but again, he makes you forget he's like 30. He's gonna be 34 years old next year. Like he keeps making people forget how good he is, or how old he is. He keeps, So you're looking at a continually aging tight end who is still the best tight end in football. Don't get me wrong. You're looking at Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney under contract, Marquez Valdes-Scantling technically under contract. We'll see. But you how early do you invest in receiver? Like you threw Quentin Johnson's name out, and I just
they can't. They won't find him. He's not going to be.
He's not going to be there at 27. But I guess I'm just you threw receiver out is what I'm saying, and I think the Chiefs just got done taking a receiver in the top 60. Would it stun you again if they did? Like it would not stun me if they did it again, Matthew.
No, I would not be shocked at all. If they don't bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, I think it's a lock that they spend one of their first 2 picks on a wide receiver. Looking around, though, the caveat is, DeAndre Hopkins sounds like he might be on the trading block, and Chiefs fans are kind of running wild with that right now. Michael Thomas might be getting released at some point in time. There might be some wide receivers that are going to be available that aren't right now. But if you go look at the free agent wide receiver group right now, it's kind of Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and Darius Slayton and Jacoby Myers. Like that's your top guys. So they're going to get, so if they lose Juju, there's not like there's somebody they can bring in free agency that's there right now to make up for it. So you have to kind of start looking at where do we go draft a player? And the issue with the Chiefs is you kind of got to draft that guy early. They drafted Sky Moore early. They couldn't really find a way to use him. Maybe part of that was the personnel they had, but it wasn't like he became a reliable player for them. So they can't sit back and take this fun player at the end of round 2 or round 3. And because we like him, we feel good about it. But like the Chiefs have shown you time and time again, it takes a little bit of time for them to feel comfortable using receivers in this offense the right way or figuring out how they want to do it. So yeah, if the Chiefs don't bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, and this is regardless of MVS here or not, I don't think he impacts what they do at wide receiver one way or the other. I think he might be here. He might not. Who knows?
I think that's why you move on.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. I think that's why you move on. He doesn't
impact. Yeah. I don't think he impacts it. So it's just all about what happens with Juju, really. And at the end of the day, this wide receiver class is a stark step back from what we've had the last few years. Yep. This is not the loaded class. Next year's class, okay, we can start talking. This year isn't that top end class. So you're already drafting at the end of round 1. The wide receiver run is probably going to happen later, but once it starts, they might come off quick for people doing the same thing, trying to get ahead of it. So I don't know. I don't see a lot of great options for wide receiver in round 1. And that's what scares me a little bit. I don't see that guy that I'm anticipating being there at the end of round 1.
Jalen Hyatt, no matter what.
Henry Ruggs, look where he went. I think people are going to act surprised when he goes top 20, and I don't know why.
They shouldn't. He's just an elite vertical threat, and those go high in the NFL. It's the reason why Mecole Hardman's going to get paid this offseason, because guys like that can run and are vertical stretchers are everything to an offense. So yes, it's going to be difficult. This is one that I actually look at a little bit, and I wonder if the Chiefs are willing to make a small trade up to try and go get a wide receiver, because it does kind of fall off a little bit. There's not guys that you're looking at in round 2 and going, well, you know what, with just a little bit of seasoning, you can get that guy right now. It's not like in previous, there's no Christian Watson that you're looking for in round 2 of this year's class that you're saying, hey, we can get this big, fast guy and kind of train him to do everything else. And then, oh, look, he hit immediately, because that you draft athletes. So yes, I do wonder, wide receiver, if that is going to be a priority and they are not either going to make a trade for a guy, which at this point, I don't know why you would, or make a big splash for a guy. Again, DeAndre Hopkins is old. Brett Veach doesn't like to add olds to his roster. So maybe you try and sign a guy, as a mid-tier free agent, try and keep Juju Smith-Schuster, and then rely on the depth you have. Kadarius Toney has blossomed into something fun. We haven't seen everything that Sky Moore can do. Maybe you expect him to take that next step. You've got guys like Justin Ross that they have clearly stashed on the practice squad. Who knows if they get anything out of him, if he's even on the roster, but a guy that they liked and that he showed up a little bit in camp. You have enough kind of rolls of the dice now at this point that I don't think this team is looking at it and saying, we absolutely desperately need a true number one that's going to be able to go out and beat everything, because frankly, Travis Kelce is that guy for another year, and they did it this year without him, and Patrick Mahomes played at an MVP level.
I have some theory. Like I'm X-type receivers I'm just curious about too moving forward, like how much they value them. Just that's a bigger story. So what does that mean for your roster construction? But they've already got like Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, so like what are you doing there either? So one quick thought. The Chiefs have, just as a reminder, the Chiefs have 12 picks still currently. Because they have a
5 of them like don't count.
They have a 1, a 2, a 3. They have a 4th round pick from Miami.
Is it the first 5, Maddie? Because he's been really good in day 3 lately.
Hey, yeah.
There's a lot of late round 7 picks.
You're right, Maddie. They shouldn't grab Jalen Watson, Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Johnson. Yeah, good point.
One of those.
Anyways, can I finish reading the draft capital off really quick,
go ahead.
please? Thank you.
Did you get to round 4 yet? Because we can cut you off then.
1, 2, 3. round 4 from Miami, their own 4th rounder, a 5th round pick, the 6th round pick from Miami, a 6th round comp pick, a 7th round pick from Atlanta, potentially for Rashad Fenton, their own 7th, and then 2 compensatory 7th round picks. That's 12 picks. That'll be a fun weekend in Kansas City. So they do have a lot of draft capital. Maddie, the floor is yours. I want to give you a chance because like you've got a lot of thoughts in your head. I guided us on like the 3 big picture, I think positions that are going to kind of help determine this draft, in how they navigate it. But is there any other position that you think, like, I think there's one thing to be said about, hey, these are the potential needs of this football team based on contract situations. There are positions that can be upgraded. Maybe there are some other swing positions that you're looking at for this draft too. I don't know. I just want to give you the floor to give you an opportunity to talk about whatever you think is the highest priority outside of the 3 things that we discussed.
I mean, yeah, I definitely got a couple things here. I think it starts, we touched on it a little bit, but it's similar to the offensive tackle argument, only more so. You don't get pass rushers at the end of round 1. And this is probably a tricky year to have this conversation since the Chiefs are coming off of drafting George Karlaftis, who did have a very good rookie year, who has shown for a late round 1 rookie to come out and be actually very productive. And even if you look around the league the past few years, there's some guys taken towards the end of round 1 that are starting to pop up. It's starting to come every year now. You're getting a late round 1 guy that is starting to shine a little bit. Jalen Phillips, I think he went pick 20, 23, so it's not quite as late as the Chiefs are picking, but still later than you would imagine. He's on the cusp of becoming a star. George Karlaftis had a very promising year. I don't know if I still see star flashes there, but it was a good pick. It was a very good pick for the end of round 1. So if you're the Chiefs, you're sitting here, how do you guys think you approach this? Do you think I can't get a star defensive end at end of round 1? So do I trade up for one? Do I trade for one? Or instead, do I just continue to collect George Karlaftis's solid players and try to just play complementary football around Chris Jones? Like, how do you attack the defensive end position from an disadvantageous draft positioning standpoint?
I trade for one. I do, but I condone for that at the trade deadline. Brian Burns, Josh Allen, make a move. And, especially if you're kind of dead set on trading a first or using that first to try and pick a defensive end, make it for a guy that, even though you got to pay him immediately, and I know that we're talking about paying a lot of guys right now, but if you look at the cap space, you pay a lot of guys, guess what? You still got room. The Chiefs are in really good space with their cap space right now. So I would trade that move or trade that pick because, frankly, you do need an impact guy there. George Karlaftis, I think, has the potential to be a really high-end DE2. And if you've got a good DE1 across from him and Chris Jones in the middle, that is a just absolutely terrifying defensive line. And it doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is, whether that's Steve Spagnuolo, Joe Cullen, outside guy, whoever it is that it ends up being next year, they're going to want that defensive line. And if you're trading that first round draft pick, that doesn't mean that you can't still load up. There are some gambles near the end of this draft that you can try and get maybe some lighter guys that are just pure pass rushers, guys to play some more on base downs. There are guys like that in this draft that are maybe a little more specialized than maybe in some previous years. So lean on that a little bit more and use the first to make a splashy move at pass rusher and just get really good. You still got Mike Dana in-house. I mean, a guy who's been very productive this year. If you're adding another defensive lineman, that makes you a really good rotational group. So I'd do that.
You use the word gamble, Craig, and I think that's one of the things that you can potentially do too, is you take a little bit of a risk down there. You take Nolan Smith hurt. He's not a perfect fit. He's a little bit lighter, but man, that dude is a super uber talented football player.
Joe Cullen, though.
I know. It's more about like, hey, like that's the philosophy you employ, is like you take a gamble on a guy coming off an injury. You maybe try to get a little bit of value there just to try to, add some more like closer to the blue chip talent that you're seeking by maybe taking a little bit of a risk. The Baltimore Ravens have done this a lot as they've developed their team. Even Odafe Owa might have been going a little bit earlier than he was. I think wasn't he coming off an injury? They drafted the Michigan pass rusher just off an injury and invested in him. Like, maybe you take some swings at some of these key positions, some of these high profile positions. You try to see if there's some value that you can let fall to you by taking a risk and grabbing somebody off of an injury. Like, those are the paths to success. But like, I think, Craig, like to your point, I think that is why like the Frank Clark move like didn't work out, because like things outside of things outside of his control and things just outside of what the Chiefs thought they were getting happened with Frank Clark. But like getting the version of Frank Clark that was in Seattle for the 25th pick, I know you have to pay him, but like you can't get Frank Clarks very often at pick 25 unless there's the stuff that happened. But man,
I will maintain Frank Clark, if he helps set, ends up second in the NFL ever in playoff sacks, well worth that first round pick. I don't care that he had some down years in the middle there, like finishes out the playoffs well, like well worth the first round pick. Please proceed.
No, that was it.
It was great. No, I'm with you. I think that trade's going to skew a lot of Chiefs fans' like thoughts on the whole thing. And I think you just have to go back and just like consider, if the Chiefs got, fourth year Frank Clark for this entire time, how would your opinion change? Maybe you still thought it was an overpay, but now the process looks a lot better when it's a guy that is perennially, 10 sacks, dominating versus the run, always healthy, always giving, like always can give it his all. Like that changes everything. So I agree. One more question on defensive line then, if we're sitting here now, January 12th, we have no idea what's going to happen. What do we think they're looking for in terms of pass rushers? Do you think this is a transition to a Joe Cullen-esque pass rush? Do we think this is a traditional Steve Spagnuolo pass rush? Like where you want to tell these fans, these great fans, these people listening, all 157 of them right now, what kind of defensive lineman do we think the Chiefs are going to be looking for in this draft?
You're asking me to call my shot on defensive coordinator? Okay.
What? No.
Listen. I reserve the right to change my mind if Steve Spagnuolo has an elite playoffs here, but I think that they would look at Joe Cullen again. I think he really overperformed as a defensive line coach this year. He's got experience. They clearly like him. They moved some coaches around to keep him in-house. And frankly, just for the sake of draft talk, make Joe Cullen the defensive coordinator, because then we're not just looking at a bunch of pass rushers and going, well,
Nope.
that guy's a
Nope.
Yep. Nope. Too light, too small. Looking at Caleb Murphy and being like, well, he's kind of fun, but nope, he's too light. I mean, yeah.
There's something to be said too. Like, okay, like there's something to be said about where this team's at, that they don't have a choice but to draft lighter edge rushers. Like there's an argument to be made that there probably needs to be some philosophical changes here as this team expects to be picking down there because of the rigidity of the pass rushers and the rigidity of the person selecting the pass rushers.
This is a thick edge rush group, though. There's plenty.
Thick one.
There is plenty of options for the thick defensive ends.
But you're talking about impact players that the Chiefs are going to have access to. Sure. That's not necessarily the case. And so that's
where Isaiah Foskey defend the run very well.
Stop it. But
I'm with you guys. I just want to say I'm with you. I don't think it's 100% dedicated to the defensive coordinator to make this change. I think there is an outside chance that Steve Spagnuolo, even if he's back at defensive coordinator, might be willing to hedge a little bit on the personnel and how they're going about using them. That's just my theory. My feeling on that is he might be willing to go with a little bit lighter guy because they've been using pass rush roles so specifically this year. Like they very specifically have guys doing certain things. I just think there's an outside chance. And then you go look at the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick, who is notoriously getting big guys out there. They have Josh Uche, and he played like 400 pass snaps and like 96 run snaps all year long.
He was elite on those 400 pass snaps too.
And he was elitely bad on the 90-some run defense snaps too. So it's just, there's a chance. You guys got anything else in defensive line, or can I pose my last big question here?
The last big question before we get out of here.
Sure. Whatever floats your boat, buddy.
Kid's going to leave. It's just going to be you and me.
Safety. How do we feel? The Chiefs locked up on safety after the draft pick of Brian Cook, the addition of Justin Reed. Juan Thornhill is coming up on his contract is being up now. Do we think the Chiefs are bringing him back? And then what do we think about safety going forward? Is it a position you anticipate them targeting, or do you think they are okay with Cook and Reed as the core, and they're just going to try to funnel in a third safety to complement those two guys?
I think, I'm a Matty answer the hell out of this one. I don't think they're not looking. How about that? I don't think that Juan Thornhill is here. But this is the spot that they're going to be picking in the draft is a prime spot to add really good safeties. That's where a lot of really, really good safeties have come out. Now, obviously, there's some slam dunk guys that have gone earlier than that. That's fine. But there's a lot of really top quality safeties that have gone at the end of the first, early second round. And there is a chance, once again this year, that there could be some really good safeties available at the end of the first round. So I think the Chiefs are going to stack their board. I think they're going to have a lot of safeties high on their board, but I don't think they're going to go out of their way to move up for a guy. If Brian Branch is there at 22, Matty earmuffs, I don't think that they're going to trade up for that guy. I think they would just wait. Now, I don't think he's going to be there, but I don't think that's a situation where they're going to move heaven and earth to go make that happen. So with that in mind, I think that they have a shot basically to stay put. I think that's one of their stay put options at the end of the first round, not having to reach, just sit back, let the best safety come to you. If they all fly off the board, or if you need to make a trade up, add the third safety at round 3, round 4, something like that, and lean on Brian Cook and Justin Reed going forward. They have that flexibility. So I am perfectly fine with them just being comfortable with their safety position, or drafting a guy that could potentially be a more game-breaking safety on the back end.
There's a couple of thoughts. Who's making plays on the ball on the back end of that defense? Who's making plays back there? Because I don't see Brian Cook, and I really, honestly, Justin Reed, I don't see how many plays that he's going to be making on the back
Trent
end.
McDuffie.
Trent McDuffie. Oh, you're hoping L'Jarius Sneed. I would love some more ball production back there personally. Someone I think with a little bit more range to play single high than those two, I think would be a little bit more preferable. I don't know. We'll see. I like trying to build a group with Brian Cook, Brian Branch, and Justin Reed would be interesting. It would be
phenomenal.
But it'd be also interesting, like who you putting back there as in single high.
Why am I playing single high?
I'm playing too high.
Why am I playing single high?
You got to play a little bit. Like I just like who?
Yeah, if I have to play it a little bit, Justin Reed or Brian Branch, I think, are plenty athletic to go do it from time to time. And Tyrann Mathieu did it from time to time for the Chiefs. Like I think we can get by with Brian Branch and Justin Reed doing it. Both are plenty fast. And
the alley fills from the safety position with those three. Holy shit!
Oh, just the concept of Trent McDuffie, L'Jarius Sneed, or Brian Branch, or a combination of any two of those three playing in the slot on either side. One, getting to play in man, like it's just the amount of stuff that I think you can do with those three guys in particular because of how versatile their games are is through the roof. It is a huge Brian Branch fan podcast, especially from Craig and I. Kent's a little bit more reserved on him. That's okay, but we're big Brian Branch fans. I think that this is a guy that can play man coverage as well as a cornerback. He's a guy that when he is playing as like a deep half safety, shows excellent IQ, excellent route awareness, and he's fantastic at coming up to play the run. There is not a lot of tape out there of him playing single high or really having to play even a ton of like quarter stuff. And that is the question you have for a guy that would have to do that in base. But how often are the Chiefs in base? Am I really not drafting a safety because I don't know what he looks like when he's playing as a deep single high safety? Guess who else didn't do that coming out of Alabama very often? Minkah Fitzpatrick. Guess how darn good he's been in the NFL. Not that Brian Branch is going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick.
You heard it here first.
Comparison.
You heard it here
first. That would be my player comp, though.
I think the list starts and stops at Brian Branch as far as like the guys you're geeked out about if they Chiefs take him at the safety position. I think we kind of covered some of the big questions about the draft, like kind of getting an early look at that. And obviously, like free agency is going to change it, but there's a lot of contingencies and like there's some big pieces that could really change the outlook. And I think that's kind of what we wanted to look at a little bit today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're watching again. Oh wait, we do have some news real quick. Well, wait, real quick.
Big news. Bow, 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 bow.
Pew, pew, pew. Jim Irsay has just tweeted out that he has just completed his interview with Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy has interviewed for the Indianapolis Colts job. I'm a little bit surprised that he is getting this opportunity, Matthew. I kind of wondered if that was going to be the end of his chances of interviewing, but Chris Ballard in the Indianapolis Colts and Jim Irsay have given Eric Bieniemy an interview today.
So there's a lot to unpack here, from Jim Irsay announcing it on Twitter by just essentially saying, we have completed our interview with Eric Bieniemy, and then the flex emoji. So what a way to announce, just straight from Irsay himself as a tweet with emojis. That was amazing. But then also Zach Kiefer, who covers the Colts for the Colts in the NFL for The Athletic, also tweeted out the Colts have been digging in to Eric Bieniemy the last few days, and then they had completed the interview with him per Jim Irsay. So they've apparently been doing a little bit of legwork the past couple days. They were able to keep it under wraps here for a little bit. Now it's popped because Irsay just wanted to tell the world via a tweet. And, I don't know if Irsay does stuff on purpose or not. I don't know what his process is. But it's interesting the way it was announced to me.
Yeah, and just to put it in reference with the rest of the coaches that the Colts have been looking at here, they've been seeking permission to interview Shane Steichen, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Raheem Morris. They did interview Bubba Ventrone. They did interview Ejiro Evero, and reportedly, now Eric Bieniemy is one of those. Jeff Saturday certainly has gotten an interview as well, kind of as the interim head coach there. So they are in on some of these players, some of these coaches that are hotter names. But when you look at that, I mean, really, Shane Steichen's the only guy that I think you look through that list and you're like, man, that guy's been on more hot head coaching lists than a guy like Eric Bieniemy. So it could be that they're looking for kind of that tier, obviously not going after Sean Payton or anything like that, but could be looking at that tier. Maybe this is the spot that Eric Bieniemy finally gets himself a shot to coach an NFL team.
Okay, so one thought here is, with Jeff Saturday, former player, culture guy, they wanted to try to bring him in here to bring him into the building for the rest of the season to establish a culture, have some brutally honest conversations with that team. And the funny thing is, if you read some of the reports and stuff, it sounds like some of those things were really genuinely materializing for that organization. A lot of the on-field product on Sundays wasn't necessarily translating to some of the anonymous feedback that they were giving about the Jeff Saturday era that said, hey, look, there's some, maybe not the best Sunday performances, but some of the responses to these guys and the culture being established in some ways, was working. Well, Eric Bieniemy doesn't pull punches. That's one of the things that teams, that the team respects about him, that players respect about him, the brutal honesty, the accountability, the loving guys hard. I mean, if those were some of the things that Jim Irsay was seeking in his next head coach, well, I mean, I think there's some correlation to what Eric Bieniemy can provide when you listen to some of the things that players hold dearly about Eric Bieniemy is that accountability and that leadership and that brutal honesty that breeds a lot of love too.
I think EB's the kind of coach that makes a lot of sense for the Colts. Coming off of Frank Reich, and he's kind of the offensive mind, a play caller. He's in control of one side of the football, which makes him an easy scapegoat when that side of the football doesn't work. But usually when you do that and it fails, the pendulum swings the other way. So you might consider a defensive head coach, but defensive head coaches don't work out a lot in the NFL anymore.
Mm-hmm.
NFL's kind of turning away from those guys. So the next type is the motivational guy, a manager type. And I think that's EB's path to being a head coaching candidate. I don't think he comes across, I mean, I could be entirely wrong, but as a guy that's going to control the whole offense, call all the plays, design everything, he's going to have his fingers in there. But that's not what he's going to do. He is going to be managing everybody else, put together a good staff, have a good beat and a good read on everybody. And if you look at the Colts roster over the past years, they haven't won because of Frank Reich's elite offensive game planning or play calling. It's been based on the type of player they get, the buy-in they've been getting. Like that seems to really resonate with the way Chris Ballard scouts, the way that scouting department brings players in and what they respond to. So I think Eric Bieniemy makes a lot of sense for that team. I think that's a good mesh, and it's a quality roster of guys overperforming their talent level, but it's still a quality roster. They're just a quarterback away. You're not asking Eric Bieniemy, first-time head coach, to come in there and rebuild a 53-man roster. He needs to find a quarterback and keep everyone motivated, and then they should see themselves as a competitor for the playoffs or the Super Bowl. It's like that's a good spot. That's a good spot to be in for that type of coach. I think it makes sense from both sides, but boy, they're interviewing everybody right now.
They kind of are, yeah. And I'm lockstep with Maddie there. I think he makes a lot of sense. You look at that Colts roster and kind of the way that every season recently has spiraled downward further and further. You need a guy that's going to try and hold some accountability, try and bring that squad up. And, after they trade for Derek Carr and they have their quarterback, like at that point, you can look at that roster and go, oh, they probably are going to win the AFC South. And that's, with Eric Bieniemy at the helm, that's not out of the question. And boy, that would be a hell of a turnaround in year one.
One other thing to kind of keep an eye on when it comes to Eric Bieniemy and the Colts potentially is he was firsthand to watch a quarterback developmental process. If I know you tongue in cheek a little bit about Derek Carr, I hope. But if they go take the swing at quarterback which I think Colts fans have probably been wanting them to for the longest time. If they go make a big move and get a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, well, I mean, Eric Bieniemy was a big part of helping develop Patrick Mahomes when he first got in there too. And he's kind of seen that development, that transition, and how to help facilitate a young quarterback starting to enter the league. It's going to be interesting to monitor. We'll see. I believe Times Ours has reported that there are potentially in Times Ours, Nate Taylor, Seth Kaiser, Joshua Briscoe. I don't think I need to explain who those guys are, but it sounds like Times Ours. Nate's reporting that and you can find Nate on KC Sports Network too, that there might be even more interviews for Eric Bieniemy in line as well. So good for Eric Bieniemy that he's getting some more opportunities, and we'll find out if he is the next coach of the Indianapolis Colts or somebody else. Eric Bieniemy interviewing with Jim Irsay Thursday night, January 12th. That is going to do it now for the KC Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you later.